Hello and welcome to bonus topic 18. And tonight we're just going to continue a little diversion talking about some of the health related aspects of meditation. And I think it's completely tied into your internal map of reality because it's all related. So we'll continue on with this little discussion today about cells. And we're going to zoom in particular, about cellular health and what that means. Okay. To me, the cell is the theoretical atom. It is the smallest unit that you can break a human down into. Now, there are pieces that make up a cell, but the cell is the unit, the living unit that divides and creates us. So we're going to go into that and how that relates to health. And it's a very fundamental concept that once you start thinking this way and working this way, you can affect changes in your own holistic health approach. So to do this, we're going to take a little look at some of the historical aspects. Where did this whole idea of cellular health come from? And again, I want to point out this is, my take on it. There could be, other aspects here, but I'm just going to make a shortcut and go to what I think the key turning point was in understanding human health. And then I want to talk about the cell itself and its life cycle and, what does it mean when we talk about a cell? And talk about something called cellular differentiation, the miraculous ability of cells to make everything that is you. Now, let's talk about what happens when things go wrong. And two areas that I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to talk about something called scurvy. But in my understanding, really, what scurvy is basically premature cellular death. Like a cell has a life cycle, right? From being birthed, being created from another cell, just through cellular division, to when it is decided that that cell needs to be terminated. But this premature cellular death, and the big one that I want to talk about is scurvy. And you don't hear it talk about much, but it's big one. And the other thing that I think affects us in our health is our cellular respiration. The way cells generate energy, there's a costly method and there's a cost-effective method. One method of generating cellular energy, okay, the processing of the various elements that a cell needs to function. One method is very cost-effective and one isn't. The one that isn't can promote all kinds of irregularities in our health systems. Okay, so we'll talk about scurvy, which is at the cell level, and then we'll talk about cellular respiration, which affects the systems that cells make up. And finally, we'll just wrap it up by talking about cellular health in general. What are the things that, in my opinion, that we can do on a day-to-day basis to promote cellular health? Okay, so let's talk about where I think the concept of cellular health comes from. And it's from this very nice gentleman, a very amazing gentleman called Linus Pauling. And I always think of the cartoon, the Linus cartoon, when I think of Linus Pauling. And everything I've read about him, he just seems to be a really nice person. He just happens to be a genius. He's one of the only people that I know of that has won 2 Nobel Prizes independently, based on what he's thinking. One of the areas that, as you can see in this picture, in one hand he's holding the nucleic acid chain, DNA chain and his hand. So he did a lot of work in understanding how DNA goes and works within a cell. And he got one independent Nobel Prize for that. And then he got another Nobel Prize for his understanding of the orange, or vitamin C. He's the person that promoted vitamin C. And his knowledge of how cells work, in conjunction, the chemical reaction of what cells need to function, comes from his understanding of the inner workings of cells and his understanding of how vitamin C, or ascorbic acid, plays a key role. I like to think of vitamin C as being one of the key components in maintaining the health of a cell. And remember now that the cell is the atom of our life. It's the smallest denominator that you can divide a human body down. So understanding the cell is important. So let's take a little trip through understanding the cell. And again, just keep in the back of your mind this really great person, Linus, that introduced the idea that if your cell is not happy, then your organs, your life systems will be not happy. And I like to also think that when we think about being infected, it's really a cell war between other cells. So you have invading cells that attack your human cells. So let's take a look at it. So when a cell is created, when a human is created, it's from a single cell. And I won't go into the whole fertilization process, but you understand that there's a component from your mother and a component from your father that, when joined together, form a complete cell. So that's another whole story, which we can get into on a later date. Okay, but when there is a new life created in the mother, it's from a single cell where the sperm and the egg have joined. And from that single cell divides into two identical cells. Then those two identical cells divide again into four identical cells. And then they divide into 2, 4, 6, 8 cells. And then that division is called exponential growth. It happens that we end up having trillions of cells. The key thing is that from that single cell has the knowledge to replicate and to do something called cellular differentiation. Now, what happens at a certain point, that single cell, and it keeps dividing, at a certain point, it's no longer good enough just to replicate identical copies. These are sometimes called stem cells, which are the original cells that make all the other cells. But in the center of this picture, you can see here something representing a stem cell. From this identical cell, it then decides to create unique cells. So it differentiates, and it creates some cells become nerves, some cells become skin, some cells become other facets of the body. And these cells differentiate, and you end up as an adult having somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 trillion human cells. That's a lot of cells. But they're not all identical. So from that single identical cell, at some point, these cells decided to become different and to take on different roles. And some of these roles are completely amazing, like the cells that decided to become brain tissue, the cells that decided to become eye tissue or nerve tissue. They're quite amazing. And then these cells form complete systems, like your arterial system and your cardiovascular system, your digestive system, your bone structure, your spinal system. All these systems are made up of differentiated cells. This magic starts to happen around 9 weeks in gestation. So around 9 weeks, the cells begin to divide off and take on different distinct roles. And again, all this information is held within the original cell. Then at some point, things start to go awry. Now, one major problem is something called scurvy. Now, scurvy, when it happens, it can happen very, very subtly. But I guess the story goes that when people were originally traveling across the Atlantic from Europe to North America, the sailors began to get very sick and die. And no one knew what it was. And finally they landed, like here in Nova Scotia, they landed. And it was the native Indians that gave them tea made out of pine needles. And this pine needle tea contained high amounts of vitamin C, and it saved their lives. They later learned to bring along on these long ocean journeys, to bring around with them something that could contain vitamin C. But you can see here on the chart that the vitamin C affects, scurvy affects all of your cells. It's something that is basic to the structure of the cell. So one definition of scurvy is that due to the lack of ascorbic acid in your body, the cells begin to lose their differentiation. They begin to not be able to hold their shape. And in the case of skin, your skin begins to deteriorate, your teeth. And this is where it's most commonly noticed, is the deterioration of the gums and teeth. And that's where doctors would initially look to see the health of your gums. But it's in every cell of your body. It begins to lose structure. So there's something about vitamin C and how cells work that maintains the integrity of the cell. And you could go and you can look up Linus Pauling's work, or you could go to there's a foundation site in his honor that goes in great detail about vitamin C and the cell. But the key here is to understand that the way the cell works needs vitamin C to maintain its unique identity. When vitamin C is missing, then the cell goes into a condition called scurvy. Now, this is important because it's life-threatening, but that's only when it becomes really obvious. And I think what things that Linus Pauling was saying was that there are very subtle levels of vitamin C deficiency that, when they persist for decades, cause other related diseases. You can look this up, but there are diseases related to the malfunctioning of your cells. The one that originally comes to my mind is tooth decay. So you can preserve your teeth by taking a good quality vitamin C. So let's look at another aspect of cells. In order for a cell to function, it needs to produce something called ATP. Now, this is an amino acid triphosphate that is basically like a battery. So each individual cells, all 30 trillion of them, do this. They have to be able to do this. Now, there are some cells that rely on the ATPs being provided, such as the brain. But so let's look at this. So there's two ways of producing these ATPs. One is through processing of plant fiber carbohydrates. So when carbohydrates come in, the cell has the ability to process the sugars in a cell, in the carbohydrate in the plant, break it down, and to produce these ATPs. But it's very expensive, and I have a whole video on this, and perhaps I'll put in the link in regards to fasting. But in order for a cell to get its ATPs from sugar that's contained in plants, it produces a lot of carbon dioxide and produces a lot of water. So one of the side effects of having too much water in your body is something called inflammation. I saw something just the other day that inflammation in the body is associated with vast numbers of other related illnesses. Everything from rheumatitis to cancer. And why is this? When we have excess water, when we have inflammation, then our circulatory systems do not work. And our cells live in a solution called intercellular fluid. And this fluid becomes diluted when there's too much water. The nutrients from the cells can't move around, and the waste from the cells can't be removed. So there is a diet that is a low carbohydrate diet, and this is associated with people who primarily are dealing with diabetes. Low carbohydrate diet will be good for people with type 2 diabetes. Do your research, check on that. But there are two forms of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. And one form is strictly related to having excess sugar. And this can be counteracted by just eating less sugar, okay? Just removing carbohydrates from your diet. The other thing that you can do to help the cell out is by fasting. So when we fast, either by doing intermittent fasting, which is to relegate a portion of the day where you don't eat, or by doing a longer fast, multi-day fast, what that does is it allows the body to live just on fats. When the cell is living primarily on fats, something amazing happens. The cell becomes extremely efficient. And the cell goes into something called autophagy or autophagy, depending on how you want. I always have trouble pronouncing that word. It's not a word that you use commonly, but let's call it autophagy for now. So when the individual cell goes into this mode, it's because it is digesting exclusively fat. So no carbohydrates, good quality air and water, and this can be achieved by fasting, okay? And all of these benefits happen, okay, when the body is running on pure energy, running on fats. This is important because if you're dealing with a health condition, and again, there's another video that I have on this, some of the issues I had to deal with, you can strengthen your cell. So you need to strengthen your cell. And the way you do that is by diet and also by fasting. And again, do your own research, look this up. I don't want to be accused of providing medical advice here, but I'm just saying that's what I had to do, and that's what's in the information out there, that fasting, by getting this cell to go into this autophagy state, that it will become more efficient. And an interesting thing, the cell then will automatically begin to cleanse. So cells that are no longer effective and they're at the end of their life cycle will self-destruct and be either reused, the parts reused, or eliminated. Why is this important? This is important because when these cells auto-destruct and remove themselves, it makes room for new cell growth to come in. So just to recap, the two approaches that I've identified here in terms of cellular health is working with vitamin C, making sure you're taking a really good quality vitamin C. I'll put the link for the Vitamin C Foundation. I'm not associated with it in any way, so it's just an information link. But I'll put the link in there for the Vitamin C Foundation, and they can give you information how to get the highest quality vitamin C. Understand that high quality vitamin C is what they used to call a vitamin injection. So you might have seen that on movies, and they make a reference to so-and-so getting the vitamin shot. What they're really talking about is vitamin C in saline solution injected. There are a number of treatments with this latest problem we've had over the last few years, the global health issue. One of the treatments that was provided, and then, I'll agree, challenged, was vitamin C injections. And why? It's because it's always about cells being attacked by other cells. And then the other step in terms of protecting your cells and strengthening your cells is to give it access to the three main things: good quality air, good quality water, you can distill your water, and food that is ready to be digested. So foods high in fat and low in carbs are something that cells can process rather rapidly. Well, that's pretty much it for the discussion today. I really did want to get this information out, and I will be going into a series of discussions now related more to meditation. And the next presentation will be on the history of meditation, and we'll be going through and looking at all of the various components, why meditation works, why it's beneficial, and how is meditation linked to understanding your internal workings. It should be pretty well obvious that, meditation is really the art of observing oneself. Anyway, that's it for tonight. Again, thank you for participating, and I want to thank my guests in Patreon who have supported me and provided. It's more the moral support. Yeah, there's some money involved there, but it's really the moral support. I make these videos because there are people in the Patreon that watch them and perhaps gain some information. And it was through people that published information that got me on my track. So it's very important to put that out there. So enjoy your week, and I will be back next week with an introduction to meditation.